I assumed before we spoke that you were like some 22-year-old guy out of college because I didn't know you in the comic book business. So what was the story?
It was a mentor of mine named Jim Krieg that, weirdly a religious story. I'd been at it for about 10 years, and I was going to a Doctor Who night with some friends of mine. There's a guy named Jim Krieg, and Jim's like, oh, I'm a writer. I'm like, yeah, sure you are. Because everybody's a writer in this town. I was at a pretty low point, and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we were going to this church service, and I remember saying to her, like, man, I need a burning bush. I need something very loud to tell me what to do next, because I don't know what to do. And my wife now, Amy, in her way, was like, well, have you prayed about it? So I did. I prayed about it that night. The next morning, I get a call from Jim, and he says, I know this is super weird, but I was praying last night, and I felt like God wants me to be your mentor.
Hey folks, Mark here to tell you about the new comics from Dark Horse and Millar World this month. We've got the Prodigy finale, issue 5, Nemesis Rogues Gallery, issue 5, the big conclusion, the Magic Order volume 5, issue 4, Nightclub 2, issue 5, and Jupiter's Legacy's big finale, issue 3. Don't miss it, these are your new favourite comics.
I did it. Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. You caught me. The email caught me right as I was doing what every, American father my age is doing, which is walking the dog, getting ready. My dog was like, let's go. It's time. I'm like, we'll do it later.
This is a big argument in their house right now. We've got 2 cats, got a hamster. Yeah. Kids are desperate for a dog. And I know that I'll be left with all the responsibility,
Yep.
because I work from home a lot of the time. It's going to be a nightmare. The dog wants out and I'm sitting working. How do you find it? Does it interrupt your day?
It's, at first it was irritating because it is every TV trope imaginable. Yeah. My 2 girls are just picking at me like, I need a dog. My wife was like, I need a dog, and because we had been living in an apartment, we just moved into a house, and my oldest daughter, what she said, to me was, I just want to have this experience while I'm young. It crushed me. It crushed me. So we got a dog, and I knew it was going to be my responsibility. I knew that it was suddenly going to be, I was going to be the one taking him for a walk, and then suddenly the dog gets its hooks into you. And you're like, oh, I'm the pack leader, but it is troublesome because I have this little chair couch thing I do a lot of my writing on. Yeah. And my dog just kind of curls up on my legs and kind of pushes me to the side. And instead of like stopping him, I'm now just like, well, this is what it is. This is what it is. So you're at peace with it? You're going to keep this dog? You're not going to... Sometimes you get a dog at Christmas and then you have them put to sleep in January. You're not doing all that? You accidentally drop some like poison, to just stop it. Oh my gosh. No. I love this stupid mutt. It's a problem, but I love it. I'm nervous that this thing's going to stop. It says your recording will stop in less than 15 minutes.
Really? Oh, if it stops, we'll figure something out. But again, I'm no help. The producer might get somewhere and he might jump in and help us. But
he might be like, do something.
And I wonder if this is from a TV show or YouTube. The kids have got this because my middle daughter, who just turned 13, she said to me a few months ago when she was really going for it with the dog, she said, "Dad, you loved having a dog when you were growing up, and I just want that same childhood experience that you had." Yep. And she goes, I'll be 13 in a few months. I won't be a child much longer, and I won't ever have that again. And I was like, oh my God. It was like,
I know.
Pummeling, wasn't it?
It's brutal. There is something about this. Like my oldest, she's 11. Yeah. And she just, all she's thinking about is like her career. And I'm like, you're 11, and she was like, she was just in this play and she was fantastic. It blew me away. I was not prepared for how great she was. Maybe I'm just being a dad, but people were saying she was really great. And I said, man, you were really great. Yeah. And she goes, hey, I don't want to do this as a career. I want something secure. Like maybe I'll go into aeronautics. Like, what? And I wonder if it's a product of like her seeing my creative life as like, hey, this year I did really well. And this year I've had no work.
Yeah.
And this year, so she's seen the highs and lows and the stresses that come with each of those. And I wonder if she's kind of internalized, because at 11, I really, for a long time, thought being a ninja was a viable option. I'm like, they're talking about careers, and I literally didn't even know about going to college until like my senior year in high school. Like I had no concept.
And the irony is there'll all be replaced with AI as well. I mean, like the kids will get about 18 months employment before AI comes in,
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah.
So how was Christmas in the Addams household then? Was it good? Did you guys have a good one?
It was amazing. This is the first time that my wife and I, even when we were dating, this is the first time we've been in our own place for Christmas.
Right.
We'd usually trade off and go to like my mother-in-law's, or we'd go to my mom's. And so this was like this. I got my whiteboard out, and we were, okay, what are we doing for Christmas? Like, what are the things? And we just started marking down like, well, these are the movies we're going to watch. We're going to have to make cookies for the neighbors. We're going to do a bunch of different things, candlelight service, like all the things that we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And we pulled it off without a hitch. It was great. It ruins me because I don't want to go to anybody's houses now for Christmas. I'm like, no. We're here. This is it. I am Clark W. Griswold. I'm up on the roof putting up lights, trying to figure out what we're going to do. And it's great because I mean, you have kids too, and you just see it fleeting. Like I can see it all just disappearing, and it, I'm like, and I'm trying to just have let's try to stretch ourselves in terms of things we want to do.
Yeah.
Like I'm taking them to Japan because it's like we went to Washington, D.C. and they were so good. They were at the age where they could travel and it's not a burden. It's much more fun. And so like, well, what else can we do? And so we're starting to figure out some of that. And
that's our next holidays.
It's great.
Bizarrely coincidental is Japan and then Washington, D.C. and New York. That's like the next 2 trips we're doing. Because the girls,
oh my gosh,
we used to just go to a beach and just the kids would play in the water. And now they need some mental stimulation, so we thought, well, we'll take them to Japan when the blossoms are out and everything. We thought this could be,
How old are yours?
My youngest is 10. Then I have one at 13, and then my oldest is in her 20s. So.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna
engaged. And at Christmas, which is amazing. I'm so happy. We love the guy, But the crazy thing is that really makes me appreciate how fast things go with the little ones as well. So my 10-year-old. Just got to get her married off now, so like, it feels like it just zips by, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. And you know what? I mean, DC is so fun. And it was funny because I had, the only reason we went to DC was because I had met a guy. And I did a podcast with this kid who was a big fan of my Flash run.
Yeah.
And then I found out that he was a Secret Service agent. He told me he was in town. He was like, "Hey, could you? Yeah, sure. I'll sign a book. I'll meet you and sign a book. I'm pretty gregarious like that." And he goes, "If you ever come to DC, I'll give you a West Wing tour." And I was like, "Oh, we're going to DC!" Like, immediately set that trip. And so the kids and I went, and because all the museums are free, we just had this ball, and you're seeing all this stuff that you're like, and they may not even appreciate it, honestly, half the stuff, but what a great time. My daughter is a little scared about going to New York because we had been living in Santa Monica. The homeless situation is escalated to a point that we left. Yeah. And I mean, it's very crime ridden. And she had a couple experiences with homeless people that scared her to death. So now she's absolutely terrified that New York is, going to be like that. And I'm like, well, you just got to know where to go and you just keep moving and it's fine, But I'm trying to convince her to do that too. Oh, the other thing I was going to say, because they're 10 and 13, before you go to DC, you gotta watch like National Treasure just to get amped up, like yeah.
I was going to show them Independence Day and just all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. We watched National Treasure and we're like, my daughter's looking around for like secret, moves and like, how do they steal the Constitution? The Declaration of Independence.
It's funny actually, like this Christmas though is like, again, I'm aware it's the end of childhood. It was the first one on no toys. Like, I got more toys. I get more toys than the children. Like genuinely, like, I looked at the stuff under the tree and it looked kind of like my Christmas when I was 10, and I realized I'm in my 50s. What the hell am I doing? What about you? Did you get any good geek toys from your wife or anything at Christmas?
I got a couple of like, I have a lot of stuff. Like, as you accumulate, I remember when I first started, I thought like in television, I thought I'll just get a tchotchke from everything I do. Yeah. And I had no awareness. I thought I wasn't going to do very much. And then it just kind of accumulated. And then other people give you stuff. So I'm trying to think what I actually got. I was very much like, don't get me stuff. Right. But I got these hilarious, like these kind of quirky Marvel like big book of puzzles, right? And I got a couple other books, but mostly everybody was really good about not giving me everything. The stuff I got is all practical.
Terrible, really good at not getting you things. That's like,
well, I know.
Talk to you about Christmas,
it's like the stuff I want is so particular and weird. And so I put a bunch of stuff on my list that are, it's like, oh, I want this. I got this great, it's called The Lord of Maps. This guy, he's online and it's hilarious. This is the stuff I like. So this is like, it's called Lord of Maps. Yeah. And all it is they're like stamps. So like if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or, you wanted to make a map of a fictional world, you got the stamps that you can kind of make the topography, and it's not. And the weird thing is, a lot of the stuff I have, it's not necessarily that I'll use it. I know this sounds so weird. There's an element of there's an inspiration in it. Yeah. And I have that with a lot of books, like a lot of, where it's the who's who, like the who's who omnibus. Yeah. I'll flip through it from time to time, but sometimes I just need to look at it and be like, oh, there it is. Oh, okay. I got the JLI omnibus, or I have a lot of old Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of nostalgic stuff. Yeah. That I will kind of recollect to it's just I don't know. There's just a piece of magic in it, especially from my youth, that I can kind of just look at, and it gets me sparked up to go again.
It's funny because comic collecting and comic reading are quite distinct things, aren't they? I've got lots of things in a million formats, like Batman Year One or whatever. But I've even got over there, I've got like big hardcovers of World's Finest from 1962 and things like that, Yeah. And I've got the cheap paperback version that cost $10 20 years ago or whatever. Yeah. I'll never read the big hardcover one because it's like 500 pages and you'll never actually. Right. But I like it being there. It's a weird thing, isn't it? And I like it in sequence with the other ones as well in alphabetical order.
Right. I do that. I'm a sucker for paperback and like pulp paperback stuff. Bruce Timm really got me hot on that stuff, and I was just suddenly like, if it's a really crazy cover, I'll be like, ooh. I gotta, but I may not even read it. I may do the Audible version while I'm walking the dog, but I've got that David Mazzucchelli, the Batman Year One, that's like 99 feet tall. Yeah. And you flip through it once and you're like, that's incredible. Yeah. And also I can't really read this,
It's just a habit somewhere, isn't it? That's the thing. It's like displaying a painting or an ornament or something, isn't it?
It totally is. I got these, these shelves, and they have these little top loaders that I put on the shelves so I can put on my comics. And as I was going through, it's so funny. It's like my taste in comics is so terrible. Yeah. Everybody's just like, it's just the stuff I love. Yeah. I didn't know that Mark Grunwald, who he was, when I was reading all this stuff by Mark Grunwald. Yeah. I didn't know, Fabian I don't know how to say his last name, Nicieza, Or, I would get the #1 issue of Atari Force.
Yeah.
It was #1. So as a kid, I was like, well, this is obviously important, or we didn't have a comic book store. So I was always about quantity over quality 100% of the time. If I could get 4 issues of a New Universe comic versus a Spider-Man comic, I'm going to get the New Universe comic, which, by the way, I own every New Universe comic because
they were dream. This is amazing.
Oh, the only thing I'm doing now that it is a hilarious, I don't know if it's trauma, but I have an older brother by 2 years.
Yeah.
And when we were growing up, my dad had bequeathed us some X-Men comics that were, some were old, very old, and they were, but we had split custody, essentially. And so my parents got divorced when I was about 5. And so we had the split custody of these comics. And we had split custody of Spider-Ham when Spider-Ham came out in the early 80s or whatever, a 10-issue run. And my brother convinced me that it was better to have a full 10 issues in sequential order than these X-Men that are totally out of order. And so I swear to you, it was straight out of the Bible. It was like Esau and Jacob. It was like, okay, you're trading your inheritance. And so he got all those X-Men books. And then years later ended up giving it to a girlfriend's brother because he thought that was not, and I was like, I hate you, and so now I've slowly been buying all those X-Men books up again. Just in terms
of villain's origin, isn't it?
It's so funny. I mean, it's funny the things that were affected. One of the big things that affected me, there was a comic book store in my town for 6 months.
Yeah.
That was it. It was that's as long as it lasted. And I come from a very small town in Arizona. The world's oldest rodeo is what our claim to fame is. Prescott, Arizona. And this town called, this comic store called Uncle Joe's. And I thought, this is the greatest moment of my life. I don't have to go to the spinner racks and see these things broken or whatever. I could get a pull list. I had no money. I'm a kid. I'm like a little kid. And they had a Halloween party. I remember it's the nerdiest anybody's ever been. It was the year that Star Trek: The Next Generation had come out. And I'm at this Halloween party dressed as Moon Knight with Star Trek: The Next Generation going on. And we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. And it's like, there's no one more nerdy than me in that existence. But I would put these books in this box, this pull list. I couldn't afford these books, but the owner, I think, was just like, oh, look at this precocious kid that loved comics. And he's not going to be able to afford, whatever it was. And I think it was like JLI #1, which just had come out, and the collector's market wasn't as big. But I had quite a few books started stacked up. Anyways, the comic store went out of business, and I was just heartbroken after 6 months. But about 2 weeks after that, I get this package in the mail, and it's everything in my pull list from the owner. And it was just so kind. It was such a kind gesture. And I'll never forget those little moments that kept me fired up about comics, going on.
Never seen him again, have you?
No, I've done an exhaustive search trying to figure out, just because I want to say a thank you.
That seems like an episode of Touched by an Angel, and that was Michael Landon, isn't it? That was the twist at the end. That's totally. That could have been what set you on your road. That's amazing. He doesn't realize. Yeah.
I definitely make it a point, though, to try to reach out to those people that really affected me or that really helped me. That's why when they started sending me to conventions, I'm terrible, because all I am is fanboying on people. Like, Kevin McGuire, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm just so excited and so thrilled to meet these guys. And I got the chance to meet Frank Miller briefly. And it was just hard to, how do you articulate to somebody that doesn't know who you are, how much they mean to you? But my old English teacher, I had to, I found her out, and just FYI, I'm not a total screw up, and you're part of the reason why,
My old English teacher actually read comic books and put me on to my first comic store. It was the opposite of the other English teacher story, yeah. In fact, the retailer I had on here a few weeks ago that he put me on to, he was one of his friends. So, wow. He's one of the many guys I owe everything to as well, yeah.
I mean, I try to, it's weird because there is that, I mean, maybe you had this bias when, obviously not from your English teacher, but I would always get, when I was growing up, the stuff that's popular now was not popular.
Oh my
It was
God.
not, it was the stuff I was constantly beat up for. And so seeing it kind of in popular culture now is very strange. But there was a bias towards not reading graphic novels, not reading comics.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
there still is to a degree.
yeah.
What?
You'd have been shot dead for it when I grew up, like,
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
I got through.
I had a secret identity kind of thing, where I was into this stuff secretly, but I passed myself off as a regular guy, so I could tell you anything about football and all this kind of stuff and everything, but secretly, this is what I was doing.
See, at least you could pass. You're like the day walker, right? Like, there was no, it was like, you are a nerd, that was it. But I passed a bunch of English tests because of those classic illustrated comics.
Yeah.
My dad had given me a stack of those and I was supposed to read, Great Expectations. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not reading that. I've got a book about dragons right here that it has my time. So I would read the or the little comic, and then I would be able to pass the test like easy. I was like, oh my gosh, comics are helping me through everything.
Well, I remember in my English exam, you could choose a movie, you could write an essay about a movie. There's a big exams you get in school that determine where you're going to go to university. You could write about a movie and you could write about a book. So I wrote about Watchmen as my book and Superman the movie as my movie, and it was like no studying required. This was great.
That's amazing. That's really. I mean,
the state it's in now. So.
Oh, and Superman the movie. I'll go back and rewatch that all the time. And
I think I've watched it too much. I think I've watched it too much. I've seen it like 10,000 times now.
Oh my gosh! I mean, but to me, it's a perfect movie. And now even the things that like. Especially the more high def the quality is, you're like, ooh, I can really see that nose prosthetic in young Clark, a little more. Or I didn't even notice the Cheerios on the dinner table. Like, that's weird. But Richard Donner is such like an incredible filmmaker, and that movie took its time in a way. It's very hard for people to take time like that in movies. I mean, you're really far in before Superman shows up.
I had this very conversation with Donner. Like, I only met Donner once, and that was one of the first questions I asked him. We had lunch together, and I said to him, "Are you nervous about the fact Superman's not into any 40 films?" Because Batman movie, Batman's there from the opening scene, the Burton Batman. And I said, "Did you not think you would lose the audience?" And he said, "They'd already bought their ticket. Where were they going to go?" And it was such a great way of looking at it, because Netflix or streaming, you don't think like that because you've got to keep everyone's attention the whole time. But back in the day, you could just tell your story.
Well, I would say the opposite. I think streaming is like, I think they kind of want to get your attention. They want to get like a few minutes of your attention.
First 5
minutes. But like, yeah, but there's so much of it that just seems... I know it's a good movie if I put down my phone or I don't pick up my phone, and I swear to you that there's filmmakers out there that started figuring out, let's just put something in a different language for a little bit to make sure people are watching, just so there's like subtitles. So you have to put down your phone. And it's wild to me because it's so much. A lot of streaming to me is like expensive straight to video stuff. Yeah. I love straight to video movies.
Yeah.
When I grew up, there was a Full Moon Video, which was this like low budget horror. It was kind of the Roger Corman of the late 80s, 90s by Charles Band. And I loved it. I love low budget everything. Mm-hmm. But at least you went in knowing it was low budget.
Yeah.
Like you knew there was no expectation. Canon films, all that stuff. I love that stuff. New Horizons, all bad. It's going to be weird. It's going to be low budget, but there's no expectation. Here, you'll watch a movie that's $100 million and you're like, this is terrible. Yeah. Just terrible from beginning to end. And there's nothing innovative. At least I remember seeing the trailer for Cyborg with Jean-Claude Van Damme, the trailer. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't know what this is. I just know this guy is in the sewer walking and there's another guy doing the splits with a knife above him. And I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I got to go see this movie. And I don't have those moments. The only person who does those movies like Mission Impossible, where you know that Tom Cruise has done something absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, he strapped himself to the side of a jet. So I guess I need to go see this movie, you know?
Hello there, do you love big expensive hardcovers? So do I. Dark Horse do these beautiful library editions, and we've got a whole ton of them coming up. The first one out is October for a collection, oversized, of Wanted and Big Game. Coming in December, you have The Ambassadors with the greatest living comic book artists. I'm talking Frank Whiteley, Olivier Coipel, Matteo Scalera, just all your favourites. You've got to check this out. And in January, the big one, The Magic Order, collecting Volumes 1 and Volumes 2 of the original series. Art by Olivier Coipel and Stuart Immonen. Story by me. You're going to love it.
But I think the formula for a long time was spend more money, make more money. And that formula is broken, isn't it? You know, because, I mean, secretly, I mean, we all know these big Marvel DC movies are costing way more than they're even saying, you know? So that formula is completely bust. So I think you go back to innovation after that, don't you? You know, you go back to movie stars and innovation. Like, for me, it feels we're at the end of that whole, I mean, this is something I was going to talk about later, but we're at the end of that sort of superhero cycle in a lot of ways, you know? And I think you're coming back to movie stars again, really, aren't you?
I think you're right. It does feel like that this year in particular, or at least 2024 in particular. Like you kind of feel this hype around certain people. Timothy Chalamet, when I saw him, I was like, I don't care about this kid. Yeah. You know, but he's made some really incredible decisions. And there was a moment where we watched the Willy Wonka movie. My girls loved it. Yeah. And they were like, we like this better than the original Willy Wonka. I'm like, that's blasphemy.
Yeah, get out of here.
You know?
Put them up for adoption.
Yeah, exactly. But then you see this guy making really great, it feels like decision making, you know, whether it was Dune or okay, I'll do a Bob Dylan thing. And there's kind of an aura around that. Like, oh, you're kind of becoming a superstar. It's weird to me, though, that there's not that case with action stars. Yeah, you know, I haven't seen all the action stars are very old now. I haven't seen somebody come in and be like, oh my gosh, that's the guy now. That's the Clint Eastwood. But there is a reason for that, though, because they all disappeared around about the year 2000. Like, there was no new action stars after the year 2000. And it's because corporate brands became the action stars. You know, so all the money went into Lord of the Rings, Marvel, DC and everything. So you're not going to be the next Stallone if you're wearing a Spider-Man suit, you know. I mean, that's true. The only one but you're right. I mean, that's why like Keanu Reeves, like the John Wick franchise is fascinating to me because he's older, you know, and there's something about Keanu Reeves that's like, I don't know. There's this weird quality about him that like, he seems like an incredibly nice guy. Yeah. You wouldn't sit there and go, oh man, his acting's so great, but I can't sit there and say it's not great because he's been in a ton of movies I love. Yeah. And he's got something, you know.
Eastwood, you know, it's minimalism. He gives you almost nothing, and yet it's a lot, you know, when you watch. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, I agree. But I love action movies. I love I have like two speeds, like action movies and like teeny bopper romance. I don't know why, like TV show, like
that's like a serial killer's profile.
He killed. I love torturing puppies. It's like no, that's the real. But I love because I grew up in the 80s, so it was always 80s action movies, and gone back to watch a lot of the old 70s cool stuff. And but it is interesting. There is a low budget market out there of martial art movies and stuff. There's this incredible I think he's incredible. His name's Scott Adkins, and he's always does minor parts in like big movies, right. But he stars in his own straight to DVD, like, you know, theatrical movies. Yeah. And I tried to get him. This Batman Soul of the Dragon movie I did, this animated movie. Yeah. We got all these cool martial artists. Except for the lead, and the lead was great. But I was like, we should get Scott Adkins now. They could all be real martial artists. You know, I'm trying to convince Bruce Timm of this, and he's like, what? But he does these really great movies, and for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, he suddenly started doing kind of more experimental. There's this movie called One Shot. It's all one take. quote unquote. It's all one take.
Yeah.
But it's an action movie that's one take.
Yeah.
And it's stinking great.
Oh,
like you're just sitting there going,
online. It looks incredible. Yeah.
it's great. I mean, it's one take and it's a lower budget, but you're like, oh my gosh, there's real stakes. There's actually drama. And then they did a sequel to it. And he also has been doing these other really interesting stuff. But
yeah,
that's the stuff that I'm just like, I'm nuts for.
Yeah.
And my kids are in taking martial arts. And I'm a big martial art nut. And at the studio, there will be these people that come in, like Richard Norton or James Liu, who's this incredible martial artist, and the Ree brothers, Simon Ree and his brother. They were in Best of the Best, and I'm losing my mind because I'm like, these are the guys I grew up with, like Cynthia Rothrock, that I love. My kids are like, who are these old people? I'm like, no, shut up. Just listen to how they're telling you to kick. This is worth everything, you know. It's the best.
I was trying to get Cynthia Rothrock to do a one-on-one session with one of my friends for his birthday. It was his 50th
Oh my gosh.
birthday, and I had this great idea for a surprise for him, and I spent a year planning it. And I never heard back from her. I tried everything. I went through Netflix official. I went through her agent, everything, and I never got hold of her. I think she must have been, guy's a lunatic. He sent me like 20 emails now. You know?
I met her once at San Diego Comic-Con. She was up at one of those places and I'm like, $20 for an autograph, and like I get to talk to you. Like I'm thrilled. I had my thing. That would have been amazing. I almost bought a ticket. I wanted to meet Chuck Norris. I was like, I'm 100% on board to meet Chuck Norris. And then I bought the VIP pass and everything. And then he canceled from that convention. And I was just like, this is terrible. So I'm constantly looking like, where is he going to be? Because I really want to meet him. The other one was my goal in life for the longest time. When I told Dean Devlin this, I was sitting there at Comic-Con this year and you know, if you've been to, you see just people you know or people you recognize, and I'm having a meeting with the comic company, and behind him, I see Dean Devlin sit down with his daughter. Mm-hmm. And I am now not in this conversation. I am now thinking about how I can tell Dean Devlin that I like Universal Soldier and this cool story. And so immediately we're done, and I get up and the guy I'm with is like, hey, I'll walk you out. I go, hold on, I got to be a real fanboy. And I went over to Dean Devlin. I'm like, I'm a big fan. I'm from this little town called Prescott, Arizona. He goes, we filmed in that town. I go, I know you filmed in that town. We had a video class, like a video news channel in our high school. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I swear we must only had it for a year or whatever, but they do like a little video news channel. And so Universal Soldier was filming nearby, and one kid got to go up and interview people. Yeah. And he's just asking one question, like Dolph Lundgren and people, and they get to Van Damme, and Van Damme's like, what is the question you want? And he goes, will you kick me in the head? And Van Damme's like, he says, is your insurance paid up? And he goes, yeah. And Van Damme taps him, and he looks at the camera like, and I have never been more jealous in my entire life. And so I've been chasing that. I'm like, I just want to get kicked by Van Damme. And so I had this pitch for Hard Target 3. And I was manifesting it, man. I was going around. People were like, what movie would you want to do? I'm like, Hard Target 3. They're like, there's a Hard Target 2. I'm like, shut up. Yes, there is. But I will do it. It was Universal 1440. Was kind of the straight DVD studio at Universal. I think they shuttered. And I went in. I don't know how I got. My friend who was a producer got us a meeting, and I pitched. And I went in, and literally the person that was there was like, she had worked. I knew it was going to go well because she had worked on a movie with Albert Pyun, who's the director of Cyborg, but he also directed Sword and the Sorcerer, and he directed this movie called Knights. Yes. Oh my gosh, Knights is with Lance Henriksen, Chris Christopherson, and Kathy Long. You cannot find it on DVD, but it is available on YouTube for free. And I was like, she said something about working with Albert Pyun. I go, yeah, I know. And she said, oh, I worked on a movie. You, there's no way you would have known. And I said, is it Knights with Chris Christopherson and Kathy? Her mouth like opens. And I go, yeah, you guys left on a cliffhanger. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on, and then I pitched my heart out for Hard Target 3. And she had told me that Hard Target 2 was a disaster for them. And so they kind of shuttered the brand, but they said the pitch was so good. We got to go down the route. We got to try to figure this out. And I'm like, oh, all in my head, I'm just thinking, I'm going to get kicked by Van Damme. This is it. This is the bucket list. I'm going to have it happen. And as it kept going, it became another situation like that. I think Van Damme or his people were just like, what is happening? Like, this sounds really weird, and it all kind of fell apart. But there was a brief shining moment. I thought, oh, this is the moment where you're chasing the dream. This is going to happen.
To rewind a little bit, actually, like I assumed before we spoke that you were like some 22-year-old guy out of college because I didn't know you in the comic book business. Normally people kind of come up through the internet, and they sort of build their career. And but you seem to arrive fully formed, and I just thought, who's this genius 23-year-old
I wish.
University or something, And then I was surprised when we spoke last time, that you said to me that you'd had this big career in animation and all this, So what was the story, Because for me, I discovered you with The Flash, and I was like, this is great on The Flash, But what was all the events that led up to that then? I mean, where did you come from?
It's funny. It's like when I went to school, I didn't know. I think I told you I didn't know I was going to go to college until I was going to college. It was like the one girlfriend I ever had my senior year in high school was like, I'm going to U of A. And I'm like, well, I'll be going there too. I only applied to one college. Within the month before she broke up with me, I had applied to college, the same dorm room, took my ACTs. And then, she broke up. She lived 2 doors down from me in the dorm.
Like American
it was crazy. But I loved film. I loved television. We'd go out. I loved comics. My dad had drawn some comics when I was growing up. And not very many.
Too interesting to skip over. Like, what did your dad draw? What kind of stuff was he doing?
So what I had known was that he had drawn this comic called Ghosts for DC.
Right.
It had like Dr. 13 and stuff.
Oh, the horror anthology comic, yeah.
Stuff like that, yeah. But then I had found out later when I had worked on this show called Young Justice that he'd also drawn a bunch of issues of Captain Atom in the 80s and an Alpha Flight and him and this guy, Tony Salmons, they're from the same place. And that was kind of around, but I knew my dad had drawn some books and I think he hyped it up probably more than what he had done Yeah. But and the people that it was cool. It was cool. When I found out he wrote these or drew these Captain Atom books, I was like, oh my gosh, here's my dad's drawing Superman with Captain Atom. I was like, that's crazy to me. But I found out that a lot of years later. So that was always a safe place, like movies and comic books, because my dad and I have a very tense relationship, and they were divorced very early on. So I didn't, I'd see him every once in a while, but obviously a huge part of my identity is like chasing after my father.
Oh, it's Shakespearean. That's so Shakespearean, isn't it?
Yeah. So I went to college. I was going to be a U.S. like a U.S. Marshal or something. Yeah. And then they had the different departments come up, and this girl came up from the film department. And I'm looking around like, there's a film department? You can get a degree in film? I immediately said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. And I went to school and came out here to pursue film. I'd always wanted to do comics, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't even have a clue. I didn't know how to do film either, but at least I knew I had to move to Los Angeles. That was like, you have to do this thing. And I came out here and just really struggled for like 10 years looking for work, trying to figure out how to break in, writing screenplays, working for producers and directors and also working at Blockbuster or being a tour guide at Paramount. But it was a mentor of mine named Jim Krieg that, weirdly a religious story. I don't know if I told you the story. I might have told you the story, but I'd been out here for about 10 years, and I was going to a Doctor Who night with some friends of mine because it was when Chris Eccleston had shown up. Mm-hmm. They were huge Who fans. They invited me to this Doctor Who night, with like, it was only like 5 people. One of them would get like a bootleg version of the Eccleston episodes and we'd watch them. And there's a guy named Jim Krieg, and Jim's like, "Oh, I'm a writer." I'm like, "Yeah, sure you are." You know, because everybody's a writer in this town. And I don't know. We over months we'd watch, and he goes, "I want to read something of yours." I was like, "Okay, sure. Here's something." I remember him coming back with it. He goes, "This is crap, but it's like the good crap." I was like, "Oh, okay. I don't know what that means," but months would go by. Anyways, I was at a pretty low point, and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we were going to this church service, and they were preaching on, Moses and the burning bush. And I remember saying to her, like, "Man, I need a burning bush. I need something very loud to tell me what to do next, because I don't know what to do. Like I'm writing scripts. I'm trying to meet people. I can't break in. There's nothing I can do." And my wife now, Amy, in her way, like, "Well, have you prayed about it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I prayed about it, whatever." And she asked me, and she said, "You should pray about it." So I did. I prayed about it that night. The next morning, I get a call from Jim, and he says, "I know this is super weird, but I was praying last night, and I felt like God wants me to be your mentor, and I want to put you on this show, but I need you to do these 3 things." And it was like these 3 tasks.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Holy crud." Yeah. And so I did the 3 tasks, and he put me on Green Lantern, the animated series. So that was my first job.
Even the 3 tasks makes it sound mythological, doesn't it?
I know. But he was very clever, because years later he told me the tasks weren't designed to like, it was like, I want you to take this extension course. I want you to pay for this thing. I want you to do this for me, this little whatever. Yeah. They were designed, and I use it a lot now, but it was designed to see if I would do it. Because I'm sure you have a lot of people like, "How do I get started? I want you to help me, blah, 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 blah." And I will give them the bare minimum, like, write a spec script that's this long about this, and they won't even do that.
Yes.
And so the fact that you were willing to do it, to take this class or do this thing, it wasn't about what you would learn. It was the fact that you were willing to do it.
I'm going to start to pray. I think that's a great idea. When people say, "What should I do again?" Just say, just pray. It worked for you.
That has been a weird lightning rod. Like, it's gotten me. I've tell that story. I feel like God set up that story because I have to tell that story, and I have a lot of people that are very encouraged by that, and I also have a lot of people that are very annoyed by it. So,
well, it's funny. I've never told anyone this, in public. In the late 90s, my career hadn't started yet, and the industry was falling off a cliff. There was just like nothing going. It was before the big boom that came around about the year 2000. And I remember going for The Authority. There was 3 of us going in for The Authority in mid-1999. And I remember hearing that 2, I won't say their names, that somebody else had got it. And I think it actually got released as a news report on some online, right? And I was like, that was literally my last chance, like I had no other gigs going at all. This was the kind of the end as far as I was concerned in comics. I'd been around for a few years, but never did any success. And then I went to church on the Sunday. This was on the Friday I heard this. And I lit a candle, and I did the same thing. I was like, it's a last Hail Mary, literally,
Yeah, seriously.
And then on the Monday, it got announced that news story was false. And they hadn't decided who was going to be doing The Authority at all. And then on the Monday night, I got a phone call saying I'd got The Authority. Like, which is like weird, like I've never known that ever to happen. And on the same day, I got a phone call from a newspaper, because I was always interested in journalism, offering me a weekly column as well, which paid me more money than I was making, And I was like, that's crazy. I'm going to pray again. This is pretty good.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, then you're like, I'll do this. Yeah. I wish it worked for everything. More often than not, actually, I pray and whatever, but I feel like the things that I want to get, a lot of times I don't get. And years later, I find out that you're glad you didn't get that thing. Well,
my wife has got a thing like this as well, where she says anytime she prays for the right thing.
Yeah.
There's an amazing wisdom in that, because it might not be what you think it is, and then later you find out why.
Yeah, you have to be very content with it, right? I mean, there's so much of the faith and just letting go and letting go and letting God, as they say in like the recovery rooms. But it's just like, I definitely feel that way. Yeah. So anyways, I went to school for film. I came out here. I got this job on Green Lantern the animated series, and it's a freelance gig. I got 2 episodes, and I was working at a toy company out here in Malibu.
Yeah.
And they had a bunch of cool projects, and I kept coming up with organic, like, hey, you guys should do a cartoon based on this toy. And they're like, who are you? Like, aren't you an assistant? I'm like, yeah, I know. But then they found out that when Green Lantern finally came out and animation takes so long to get done, they were like, well, why aren't you writing on our show? I was like, you have a show? And they put me on this show called Monsuno, and then they bumped me up to assistant producer. And everything was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I remember on a Friday, my wife found out she was pregnant with our first daughter. And then they fired everybody from the thing. And I spent about 3-4 years being a stay-at-home dad, kind of ghostwriting.
Were you writing? Were you writing in your spare time?
Yeah, trying to. And it's hard when you have a baby on your hip, and I would eke out like little video game things, or I'd get paid to ghostwrite some things, and I was doing that. And then Jim got a job at Warner Brothers for Justice League Action, and he brought a bunch of young talent in, my friend Tim Sheridan and Eric Carrasco and Jen Murrow and all these people that now are fairly successful. And we started working with Alan Burnett, started working on Justice League Action, and that started moving the needle, and things started spiraling. And once I started doing stuff for Lego, that really opened a lot of doors. I think the big one was when Jim and I did the Scooby Doo Supernatural crossover. That kind of shifted my career, and they asked me to come work on Supernatural and getting into live action. It's weird to me because I'm like prickly about it, but like writing's writing. There are different mediums of writing, whether that's comic book or animation or live action, and each of them have their pluses and minuses and also their own way of writing. But the prejudice against animation was wild to me, because the animation writers I knew were they're far superior in a lot of ways.
It's the same with television. I mean, in film, there's so many friends of mine who'd be like, oh, I don't want to work with him. He's TV,
Yeah.
So at every level, there's a caste system, isn't there?
Yeah, there totally is. And so when I got to live action, first of all, the amount of people that treated me differently was really hard to take. As somebody that was like bullied younger years, you just felt the disingenuousness of it.
Yeah.
Also the level of like, well, let me teach you how to write. And I'm sitting there going like, I've written, not to be a jerk, but like I've written and had stuff produced like by a factor of 10 more than you, and you're trying to tell me how to write an outline. And I'm like, that was hard to take. And so anyways, it was a great experience. It was just weird because I just kept going like, this is writing. This is what writing is. But animation, because it was paid, animation's paid less. So you're not revered as much. But while I was at Supernatural, we got a call, and that was Dan DiDio had called Warner Brothers Animation and said, I need a list of your good animation writers. We're hiring them all, for comic books or something.
His background, wasn't it? I think Dan was an animation.
Yeah. And Warner Brothers Animation was known for doing very faithful, well executed versions of the DC characters. So we all went into this room for 5G, and Dan, who I had, which by the way was wild to me because I would be at Comic-Con every year, especially before I even became a professional, praying I could be on the other side. But I would go to the DC Comics panel, and that guy knew how to sell things. That guy was the music man. He was the flim flam guy, and he was like, oh, we got trouble right here in River City. And it was the same thing. We're in a room, and he's telling us about 5G and how we're going to write everything and screw those other. I was like, what is happening? Like, this is incredible. This is my chance. I'm going to be able to write comics. Because I had gotten a chance to pitch on Batwing years before with Mike Martz, who I had befriended. But that never worked out, and I always kind of chased it. So I thought, this is it. This is the moment. Yeah. And then he got let go, and I thought, oh no, the moment is gone. And then, but my name was still on a list, and this editor, Mike Cotton, called me up. He goes, hey, your name's on this list. Would you want to do a backup on this thing? I was like, yeah. So I did like 2 backups, and then they called me. It's like, do you have any ideas for the Flash? I was like, yeah. I'm a kid of a certain age that has an idea for everything. And I honestly thought they would fire me every issue, and no one knew who I was. It was like, it's weird because the Venn diagram of people that read comics and also watch DC animated projects are not a circle, you know?
I also think comics has its own sort of its own fame that other things don't have. You know, like if a comic guy goes anywhere in the Western world, it's very unusual for you not to get 200 or 300 people showing up to get their book signed. You know, that's just what happens. You can be in the middle of nowhere and you'll be astonished how many people appear. Whereas if you have written last year's biggest movie and you show up and do a signing at a bookstore or HMV or something, 5 people show up if you're lucky. You know? So comics has got its own microcosm of fame, hasn't it?
It was weird because I've done some things that are like, you know, seen by a ton of people. Yeah. We did this show that was in China. It was like 55 million people watched the first episode. I was like, wow. Yeah. But you're right. They couldn't pick me out of a lineup. But the minute I started doing comics, hey, you're Jeremy Adams. I'm like, what? Like, it was weird. And it's uncomfortable. Like, it's both wonderful and it's uncomfortable. Do you know like, it's strange to me. People will give me death threats, you know? And I'm like, what? Like, you know, it's like over comics?
But you've got, like, you're not competing with actors in comics as well. Right. So that immediately elevates the creative side. But
That's true.
More importantly than that, I think, is the kind of people who watch a cartoon show are watching it while they're eating their cereal, generally speaking, you know, whereas the type of person who's reading comics has bought it and really loves it, you know. Yeah. So I think there's more of there's a connection with the audience in a way you don't have in television, I think, you know.
I think you're right. I wish comics paid more because it's way more fulfilling as a writer. Yeah. It feels like what live play, like live stage acting is rather than like television acting. It's like
unfiltered.
There's an immediacy to it. There's like you do get feedback. It's really fun to communicate with fans. It's really fun to go to conventions. All of it's fun, but it's also you have less people interfering with the story you're telling, you know. I mean, it's still interference, which you know, I get into it all the time, but I think that maybe the TV muscle in me, I know how to pivot a little bit better because in TV they pay you to take the notes, you know, like their notes are like, we want this, and you're just like, well, okay, you know, you're paid, but in comic books there's a little more like, you're not paying me enough to really take that note. I got to figure out a good way around it, you know. For the most part,
how many drafts would you go through in an animated thing? Like if you were writing a script, what would be typical for it?
Probably 4. Like I would do an outline, and I'd probably do three drafts and then like a polish.
Right, that's not too bad. Yeah,
it's not too bad, but mostly because animation, at least the ones I've done, it is talk about low budget. It is low budget, and you got to move quickly.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have that, and the benefit of it is as a writer, my job is to really set the stage for the guys who are doing storyboards and the people that are going on. So it gets to go through a bunch of different stages of kind of like perfection. And when you have really good storyboard guys, they'll plus whatever you've written. So it's even better than you had in your mind. And that feels like it translates well into comic books. Yeah. Because the artists that I work with, I'm constantly like, what do you want to see? Yeah. What do you like to draw? Like I try to tailor what I'm doing to them. But I had illusions. I was like, I bet the worst thing for an artist is just to draw people sitting around talking. And I said that in front of Kevin McGuire, and he's like, that's all I want to do. And I was like, oh, I got that wrong then. You know, everybody's an individual with tastes and wants, you know.
The only thing is they can't sell those pages. Those are the pages you can never sell to collect. Right. Collectors want to see Batman jumping off a roof and all that, you know. So
I mean, I get it. I think early on, right before I start, I would listen to Rob Liefeld's podcast, and he's so enthusiastic about comics too. And he had said this thing about comics being, really a visual medium, and that you have to keep that in your mind. And he's right. I can't tell you how many times I would open up a book and the art was not to my liking, and I would put down the book.
Yes,
because I'm like, I don't care.
As a writer, it's a horrible admission, but the art is 70-80% of it. Like a great artist can make a bad story look amazing. but
That's
a
right.
bad artist can murder a great.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can do it. It's just, but when it comes together, I feel like I've been incredibly fortunate with Fernando Passaran when I was doing The Flash, and even people like Amon K and different people that come in, Roger Cruz or whatever, but Zermanico also and Green Lantern. There's nothing I can write that he can't draw well. So that's you feel a huge freedom in that.
But you
Which
give
is
them good
great.
stuff to draw. There's lovely double page spreads and everything, like I think you think visually, but I think your background in animation is probably really useful for that, probably thinking visually and also story structure, because I suspect I've only produced an animation. I've never actually written anything, but I suspect when you're writing something, you cannot have any fat in animation because it's so expensive to produce compared to rolling a camera.
Well, it was funny because even on Supernatural, one of my buddies was writing something. He said somebody made a comment about his script being different, and I had got that thing on Supernatural because in animation you really don't want. This is what I was told early on, whether or not it's true, but you don't want more than 3 pieces of dialogue before something happens. With live action, you get the privilege of an actor. He can bring so much to it with facial features, all sorts of stuff, and you can't necessarily do all of that in animation at the price point that maybe I was working. So you have to have it filled with things. And like Justice League Action was interesting because it's a 15 minutes. So suddenly you're cutting out the first act and you're just jumping into a second act of a story and into the third. And I definitely think that way in terms of act structure and pacing. And when I started realizing that like the page turns are much more, can be used like a commercial break or whatever, that became that started making more sense to me in terms of like, that's why I think streaming sometimes has failed, because commercial breaks were such a natural way to break acts when we were growing up. And then a lot of streaming shows just meander. There is no act breaks. There is no crescendo. There's no like, we got to hook them so they come back after the commercial. It's just kind of like meander. And you're like, no, get to it. Just get to it. Come on. You got to give me something that I want to go to the next scene and be excited to see. Whereas when you grew up, you watch the A-Team, you're like, oh my gosh, they just got locked into a warehouse. And you're also thinking, and when they come back, they're going to build something to break out,
But that's a cultural thing, because, we grew up with no ads in the UK for most of it. We didn't get ads. We paid an annual subscription since the 1940s. I know it's crazy. And
that's crazy.
They started one commercial television channel in the 1960s, and then it kind of exploded from there. But but generally, so we used to watch American shows most of the time without ads. So we would see something like MASH or whatever, and it was just a 25-minute show with no ads.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's weird to me. It was so ingrained in me. I could, to the second, leave that television, go do something, and come back right before. And what's funny is my kids didn't grow up with ads. And the first time they really started seeing ads, it was the Olympics. I don't know if it was the last time, but the time before. And we were watching it, and it was hilarious because the ads affected. They're like, Dad, did you know T-Mobile's having a sale? There's this place called Chuck E. Cheese. Have you heard of Chuck E. Cheese? Like it affected them. Whereas my Gen X brain is completely numb to ads. Like they don't affect me at all.
So it's amazing because especially American ads, they're like every 7 minutes or something crazy, aren't they? It's nuts.
Yeah.
I can't watch TV for that reason.
That's the benefit. That is the benefit of streaming. But I just think in terms of structure, I noticed there was a big swath of people that just did not adhere to any sort of act breaks. And it felt like that. It felt emotionally, or even in the course of the storytelling, I'd be watching and you're just going like, you're just kind of filling up time with things that don't necessarily matter, or the problem of, and I'm not saying I'm good at this. I'm just saying that I've noticed a lot of people think they're Aaron Sorkin or David Mamet, and they're not, but they keep thinking they are. If they just write a bunch of words, then it'll work. It's like, no, it's not. Like, get to the point.
I think that was the problem since 24, really. That's been the problem, isn't it? Like 24 made everybody think, oh, let's do a 24-hour long storyline, and something that maybe should be 2 hours long, and everything was just moving to fit that format, and I think it helped these TV in a lot of ways, like Sopranos and these kind of things are obviously masterpieces, and Mad Men, those big long story arcs. But on the other side of it, kind of destroyed television at the same time too.
Yeah, I think that's why there's a big, like CBS, that type of procedural is kind of swung back because people, there's a little bit of like, hey, I just want to watch a show.
Yeah.
That's not totally serialized so that I don't have to, I can't jump in the middle.
Yes.
Like I love Game of Thrones, but you can't just suddenly go, I'm going to start on season 3, episode 4. Like that's not, you're going to be lost completely. Yeah. So I have a big heart. Like again, sort of like Mark Grunwald, I didn't know who Stephen J. Cannell was. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing the shows and I would see him type the computer and pull the thing at the card. But then you start seeing what all those shows were and you're like, man, these are fantastic. This guy was doing these syndicated television in a way that I really, really enjoyed, that you can just sit down and watch, and they were clever and funny and had great hooks. Like Greatest American Hero, we didn't have any superhero shows growing up. Greatest American Hero was that was it, and it had nothing to do with anything that I was reading. But I was like, this is must see television, that and Automan or whatever. But yeah, I'm always interested in the construction of the stories and how people do it. And I have this conversation with a huge lesson for me was my friend Tim and I did a book with Jeff Johns, The Flashpoint Beyond. Mm-hmm. And Tim and I had come up with an idea, and they said, well, it's in the Flashpoint universe, so we should talk to Jeff and see if he wants to do it. And we're like, Johns? Like, we were so flabbergasted, such fanboys. And they're like, yeah. And we're like, really? And then we met him, and he was so nice and so kind. And we threw out that idea, and we met at his office, and we broke it like a television series. But Jeff and Tim approach story so differently than I approach story. Mm-hmm. Like they approach it. What's this emotionally about? I'm like, I know the ending. Like I got the hook, like I'm, it's like, it's the difference between somebody going, I want to do a movie about divorce. And I'm like, I want to do a movie about a lone cop in a building taken over by terrorists. We have to end up in the same place, but which was really wild because it was really hard for me to keep my plot impulses at bay. And because they were very much like, let's talk about the emotion of what this is. And I'm like, I don't care. I want to know what the plot is. And then I'll figure out what the emotion is after.
That's your background, because what you do is, working in animation is very plot based, isn't it?
Yes,
whereas
it is plot based.
You can spend 10 issues looking at the emotion and letting that guide your story.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think that like both of them need to have heart. Anything to last needs to have some sort of heart to it. And I'm a huge John Hughes fan. I always used to like watch John Hughes movies, and there's a level of like, it's funny. And then there's drama, and then by the end, it really hits the drama. Like it's the punctuation point that kind of backfills all the rest of the story. Yeah. And I love that. Yeah. But there's some people that can carry the drama through every scene, and I don't necessarily think I'm that way because I don't think I live that way. I am like have a fun, silly life, whatever, with moments of drama. And moments of introspection. So, write what you know, I guess.
But it's funny because Jeff is somebody who you remind me of a lot, actually, not stylistically so much as where your career has come from and is going as well. So that background in Hollywood stood him in such good stead when he appeared 25 years ago. He kind of knew his way around a script. He wasn't like some newbie coming into comics. Right. He kind of knew it already, similar to you. And then weirdly, Flash and Green Lantern, sort of being the big tentpoles for both of you as well, So do you ever feel that yourself? Do you feel a kinship with him?
Yeah, I like that guy so much because he's very knowledgeable. He's very wise. When we talk to him, he definitely puts on this mentor hat. He has an entrepreneurial hat too, much like you. I mean, you were like post-Image. You were the one that made the big. Like, hey, I'm going to make my own stuff and I'm going to do it. And it's such a thrilling thing because in my mind, I'm a failed screenwriter. I have tons of screenplays that people thought were too weird. And now I'm at this point where I'm like, ooh, this is an opportunity for me at some point to start doing these as comics, which would be a lot less expensive than making a movie.
Also, whenever somebody, when something strikes big, then they say, what else have you got? I mean, there isn't any single thing I've done that I haven't sort of reused somewhere. It all gets recycled, doesn't it?
Right.
So,
Which is amazing. And Jeff's like that too. Obviously Ghost Machine is his thing too, but he loves comic books so much. But like you said, I'm not, it's weird to feel like I know I've been around writing for a long time because it took me so long to get into writing. Like there's people that are just like 19 out of college and they've hit success, And I definitely feel like if God gave me success in my 20s, I would have been canceled and dead and because I have a lot of opinions and I like to share them, Now I've learned the wisdom of just shutting up. Who wants to hear my opinion anyways? But Jeff is he was very knowledgeable. Just kind of hang around him and listen, because we were so new to comics when we got together with him and heard kind of his philosophy about different things. And I always think my mom has this phrase, chew the hay and spit out the sticks. So, you take what is good and you throw out what's not useful to you. And so he has a very distinct way that he writes a comic. And there's a lot of that I've grabbed for my own, but I think he's the coolest dude. I've only met really cool people in comics, really neat. Like Pete Tomasi would sit next to me at conventions. I'm like, you're the coolest dude ever. And I envy your hair, but I love a lot of these guys. They all like movies. They all like, stuff like that, which is really fun. I really like movies. I really like, I found myself becoming friends with a lot of old timer producers and directors. And it is my favorite thing to hear stories from them.
Our worlds, though, it's funny. I say this all the time, but if you meet somebody who does the kind of thing we do, no matter what age they are, no matter where they come from, you find yourself really getting on with them really quickly, don't you? It's a very shorthand to friendship, isn't it? I can think of 2 or 3 people who I don't absolutely love in comics. Most people, if any one of these guys was in your class at school, they'd have been your best friend.
Yes. Yes.
So,
and the only thing that's
drama in comics is so weird because you don't have everything in common, it
is that has been really fun. There have been moments where I feel like, there's a competition angle that some people maybe take too far or I get it. It's not, I mean, you've said how much you were getting paid per page, when in the heyday. That is not near, what it is now. And I know, so a lot of people, to make a living, to survive, they, there's some cutthroatness out there, but for the most part, people have been incredibly nice and incredibly generous with their time. But it's mostly been, I have to say, the fans have been the one that have been, they've been the ones that have kind of let me keep doing this. Because the minute they turn on you, you're done. They're not buying your stuff, and that's why I'm always surprised at people that antagonize. I had one moment where I antagonized fans, and I will never do it again. But it was just I was so annoyed that I was like, I'm just gonna pick at this scab for a while, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm not doing that anymore.
Well, the thing is, it's so tempting because you're bored, you're sitting at a computer for 9 hours or something like that, and then you see somebody saying something stupid or whatever, so it's very tempting, and you do forget it's the whole world that can see it. It's not just you talking to that one guy.
Yes.
But I mean, I made a decision close to 10 years ago that I wasn't going to talk politics. Because I'm on this aside that most people, sort of agree with, which is in the media, which is centre left. I'm a member of a left wing political party, but at the same time, I would never insult readers who disagree with me. It's the maddest thing. And I remember this thing, Michael Jordan getting interviewed. I don't know if you remember this, years back, and they said, "You don't want to say whether you're a Democrat or a Republican," and he says, "Absolutely not, because the other guys buy sneakers too."
That's right.
And it's such a great thing. You're in a business.
Well, and for me, I just realized I'm so dumb. That I want to allow myself the ability to change without being called a hypocrite. my opinion can change. It's done it before. Maybe it won't, but like I want to give myself space to go, yeah, you changed. And then somebody goes, yeah, but what about this tweet? You know, and it's like, yeah, I know. You know, because there's no nuance, there's no subtlety. You don't people online are not, you know, there's a lot of good, but there's also a lot of bad. But I agree with you. I want everybody to enjoy my comics, and it's funny that people get mad at me for perceived things that I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just, guys, I love comics. I love superheroes. I'm really excited to be part of DC right now because I feel like they're making a lot of really great moves. I remember for years I was like, oh man, we should get some reprints or stuff in dollar stores, and now they're doing that, which I'm
going to switch a light on actually because I want to talk to you this in a second.
He disappeared, and now that he's gone, this is my pocket. No.
No, I just noticed it was getting darker and darker in here. I realised the sun. No, DC is really weird. I mean, not to be horrible, but they were kind of treading water a bit for a little while. I wasn't reading any DC books, you know. And then suddenly, the last 6 months or something, it's like somebody's jolted them back to life.
I mean, when I started, Warner Brothers had been bought twice. Like I literally, when I started comics, we had different bosses twice. Yeah. They had fired, tons of people from DC, and then they fired some more. That was the only reason my Flash run. They had told me nobody gets more than 12 issues on the Flash, and I'm just thinking, okay, And then my editors kept leaving, and I was like, well, I guess they were like, this kid turns it in on time, so we'll keep him around,
It's been great though. I mean, like I would say, I've gone from reading pretty much no DC books to picking up over half a dozen, which
I do too, but I mean, it's a weird golden age of comics because all the indie stuff has been great too. Yeah, there's so much indie stuff, and there's so much nostalgia stuff too. Like GI Joe. I was a huge GI Joe kid growing up, and Skybound does a lot of great stuff. But watching, Jeff's Ghost Machine has some really good stuff, and everybody's putting out really cool things. Marvel's really hard for me though because I'll have the Marvel Unlimited app, and I feel like they go to number one issues like all the time, and it's almost impenetrable because I don't know where to jump in continuity because I really like continuity. So I'm like, wait, which issues come in after Krakoa? Like I don't. It's really who's Iron Man? Why is he Iron Man right now? Like I don't know.
I've got a weird feeling Marvel will be okay in about a year's time. I just from talking to guys there and everything. But like I think. Whenever Disney bought Marvel, I remember thinking this would be a problem, same as DC getting bought by Warner Brothers in 68. And I think it's, when you're not the priority, I think that you can't always make the decisions you want to make. There's people above you that dictate certain things and so on. But I do think that Marvel hopefully will get more autonomous, because I remember when we were there in the year 2000, they were just coming out of bankruptcy, so they were trying anything creatively. And that doesn't happen when Disney own you, Like, if you're actually fighting for survival, that makes you make really interesting creative decisions,
That's the thing that I wish, I pitched some really weird ideas and stuff. And have you pitched them out yet? No, I did some digital stuff from Marvel. And then I had I remember telling Tom Brewer, I got this idea. And he was like, not yet, but with DC, I would pitch some weird ideas too. I mean, tons of ideas, but they, they're either too weird or they're just like, oh, well, how do we sell this? And I'm like, I can sell it. Just do it and I'll sell it, and I tend to have that. But I imagine you're like me. It's like, well, if you say no, I'm putting it in a file folder in my head. It will eventually come out in some form,
Wanted was a rejected Secret Society of Supervillains and a Marvel version of that as well, rejected from both companies. And then I just did it as an indie and that Wanted. I mean, nothing ever goes to waste, doesn't it? It's always
right. No. I'm the same way. The amount. Why do you think I have little storage on my? It's like huge swaths of just like bizarre ideas that I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I better put it down because I'll forget it. There's that Seinfeld episode where he wakes up and he tells he's like, haha, and he writes down the joke and he can't decipher it. I've had too many times where I'm like, I remember I had this really great idea and I did not write it down. And that bugs me more. It was probably a terrible idea, but.
But so have you got aspirations for Marvel, or are you kind of quite content at DC,
I'm really content at DC because, they're letting me do a bunch of stuff. And Marvel, they they had briefly asked me to do something, but they wouldn't pay. They wouldn't, to be frank, it was like such low paying, thing that I was like, I can't.
Oh,
Can you
really?
come up 10?
See,
I
I
was
think
like,
it depends what decade you get into comics, because every alternate decade there seems to be a pay differential, doesn't there? That I was
right.
lucky my time at Marvel; they were paying people really well, But somebody told me page rates overall have really dropped since I was in the
Uh,
mainstream industry.
yeah, I've heard that. And because I come from, television and stuff, like
Yeah,
that's where I have to keep a leg in to
yeah,
actually
yeah,
survive. Like if you have kids that need
yeah,
orthodontics,
yeah.
that's where you have to be. And I had just, I've been running a Lego show for the past, year and a half,
Mhm.
and that just ended. Well, I mean, but that industry is completely collapsed here in Hollywood as well.
Mhm.
Television and animation and film. Though I know some people that film's starting to pop back up
Yeah,
again. So
I
I'm
think so.
hoping
I think
it'll.
traditional film is getting stronger again. That idea of
Yeah,
a theatrical release with a wide audience and everything.
yeah,
Trying to get as big a names on it as possible, like kind of what everyone was doing 20 years ago, seems to be
yeah.
becoming popular again. Yeah,
And it's also you also see the streaming networks, like I mean, aside from Netflix, but like you can see that Max, like there's a certain level of like this isn't making us money. Can we just license this stuff out?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
just like we used to do to network televisions. And
yeah.
that's really what's happening. It's like, well, Batman's not on Max. It's like, yeah, that's because it's on Netflix this month,
Yeah.
and then they'll sell it to this person for this month. And it's exactly what they used to do when Showtime and HBO showed up.
I mean, the one nice thing about less money around in Hollywood and everything is that's when chances do get taken as well. 'Cause
Yes,
the worst thing that can happen is too much money. When the money's
right.
rolling in, creativity atrophies, doesn't it?
It
Whereas
totally does.
now there's something interesting going on. Like all the low budget films this year have been the most interesting ones.
Yeah.
It's
And
mainly horror films.
you're seeing more money come from like that syndicated model. Like I'm having meetings and talking with people, and they always have like money from overseas in some
Yeah,
fashion,
yeah,
probably a way to like launder something. But it gets them. But those are my favorite movie stories. I remember that Albert Pion, that director that I was talking about, who he had done the Captain America movie that they're talking about. There was a director's cut that's much better from the
yeah.
90s. And he was this peculiar director, but I had heard this story about how he was hired to film a movie,
Mhm.
and he would film the movie during the day, and then he would take all that stuff and shoot his own movie at night. And it's that type of like insanity that really cool stuff shows up where people are taking risks or they don't have the money and they've
Using
got
the
to figure
set,
out something.
using the cameras and the sets and everything for the
Yes,
movie. That's hilarious.
that was the rumor. It was amazing. And I remember I worked for this producer once, and they were missing. There was a certain amount of money. It was something like
Yeah,
it was only like $50,000. Like
yeah,
the gap financing they needed, and it was a movie about card sharks and con men.
yeah.
And so he brought the two guys that are like con men, the one guy who wrote it, and he says, if we give you $10,000, could you go to Vegas and like triple this? Like it was that type of like producer mentality. It's like, we're gonna get it done. That's the stuff that I think is super cool. But I'm seeing little things show up all
Yeah.
around where I think people are going to take more chances, like you said, and then because if you're a businessman with millions and millions of dollars,
Yeah.
you need a you need a deduction. And guess what is guaranteed to be a loss for you? A movie.
Launders some drug money as well, So like,
Yes.
it's always opportunities.
Yeah, like how are you going to count? Well, we had to pay transpo. It's like one of my favorite things. If you ever want to have like, I would take those. I would do those. There was master classes for a while, and I loved getting subscriptions to those to watch R.L. Stein talk about making a movie or whatever. But the Werner Herzog one is the greatest freaking thing ever. And if you want to just find yourself so inspired, just go on YouTube and like type in Werner Herzog's best moments. They're insane. It's him talking to somebody who gets shot while he's talking. And he's like, oh, I've been shot. But he just keeps going. And he starts talking, and you're like, this man is insane. And he's talking about how he was that the one guy he worked with on the Fitzcarraldo or whatever, that's just crazy actor, how that guy had hired somebody to kill him And Werner Herzog laughs and he goes, and what's funny is I just hired someone to kill him. And you're like, what? You know? It's like, I think that's why people in this industry or like entertainment or comics or whatever, I always say, you know, you talked about how it's like you become best friends with the viewer, you because it's like talking to muggles otherwise. Somebody who's an accountant talks to you about their job and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. You know, like I know you're rich and stuff, but like I just saw the most insane thing on set that you would never believe happened. Or I met somebody that's so bizarre, but he's like the greatest writer ever. Like it's such a heightened reality that when you come back to reality, it's really difficult sometimes.
I think the last 20 years, our world has seeped into the Muggle world though as well, you know, because now it's got to the point where everybody knows all this Marvel obscurity and everything, you know. So like, for example, I had a plumber in like a couple of years back and I was talking about something and I was saying, I was saying his assistant wasn't very good or something. I said, my spider sense tingles with that guy. And he was like, mine too. And I was like, when did when did we all start saying we had spider sense, you know? Like,
isn't that weird? I still think that's weird because like I said, I was routinely, you know, beat up and made fun of for the stuff I like. And it's like commonplace. And so I find myself looking for the more obscure thing. Like I get even more obscure. It's like, you know, how many shirts, it's like the people that would, you know, they would wear band shirts and you're like, I know you've never heard of Rush or you're wearing like AC/DC and you've never listened to them because you're 10 years old. But you'll see people wearing superhero stuff and you're like, you don't know, you know, and you're like, you don't know. You didn't go through the wars, the wedgie wars, you know.
It's funny you say that because I've noticed that like kids used to all wear superhero stuff for the last 10, 15 years, but I've noticed them not wearing it now. Like National Book Day here where the kids come dressed up as characters or Halloween, you don't see superhero stuff the last maybe year or two, which is interesting. So I do feel it's coming to the end of that phase. But my optimistic thing for comics on that is that used to be the only place you got these characters, and then suddenly you had them all over CW, you had them all over theatres and everything.
Yeah.
So it goes back to just being comics again, that you get this stuff, which I think is a couple of years away, you know? That's going to be awesome for comics because suddenly a global audience of fans who can only get it in comic books. Which is cool.
I hope you're right. I mean, that's the thing about DC and Marvel that will always keep them there is because you have a continuous universe that's been going on for 60 years, you know, that people are invested in. It's just like, I want to know what's going on. I want to know the variations that somebody's come up with because that's been the hardest thing. When I started taking over the Flash, it's like, okay, I got to catch up to all this continuity. And then Green Lantern was even harder because of the mythology. And I get it right sometimes. I don't get it right sometimes. But and DC, which, you know, they treated their continuity like an Etch-a-Sketch every, you know, like they'd shake it up every time. Oh, it's brand new. You're like, oh, it is a hard thing, but that's why I always think, like you said, those characters. But my kids don't have the loyalty that I had growing up. You know, they're like, oh, there's Miraculous Ladybug. It'd be really cool if Miraculous Ladybug hung out with Spider-Man. I'm like, oh, those are two different universes, but they play Fortnite where Dr. Doom fights Batman and the Terminator and RoboCop. You know, there is no boundary for them, and they don't look at like Dogman and Cat Kid and all those graphic novels that come out that are kind of kid based. Or even manga, you know, that manga didn't exist at the level that it exists now. You had two choices. You had DC and Marvel, really, you know, for comic books, but now there's just so many options. So many options.
I think Miraculous is the most underrated of all these superhero things. I love it. Like Thomas is great. I really like it.
It's a genius idea. It's great. I'm waiting. I'm like, when's the live action version of this? Because it'll happen. And Jeremy Zag, you know, he put his chips in that one and a couple others, but that's the one that popped. And my kids were like, this is great. And it had enough of a bizarre mythology that you're like, I kind of don't understand it, but it's also, it doesn't matter because it looks great.
The best designs on TV, isn't it? I mean, the costume designs are just
great.
So
and you know, isn't that funny? Because you're, as a comic book guy, like even when you create a character, you're like, you're really trying to figure out how to make that costume pop. And it's really hard because there's been so many variations. So this simple ladybug design, you're like, that's great. You know, and Cat Noir's great. And it's like, oh, This is really well done.
Listen, before I go, I'm going to do a rapid fire round of questions.
Yes, I'll try to keep my answers limited.
I'm playing tennis with the kids in about 15 minutes, and I've still got to get changed. So here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Favorite cartoon as a kid?
Thundercats. I walked around on all fours.
Best TV show on right now?
On right now?
Yeah.
Oh man, I really like Landman. My wife and I have been watching that. Billy Bob Thornton, the Taylor Sheridan.
I love Taylor Sheridan, so I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
First crush on TV or film?
Oh my gosh. First crush on, I mean, it's probably Chitara, but if I was going to go, it was probably on Buck Rogers.
Erin Gray?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, it's
her or Daisy Duke. Like it was one of those two.
Celebrity you've never met but you hate for no good reason?
Oh, that's good. Celebrity I hate for no good reason. Oh my gosh. I don't hate anybody, man. That's hard. Pass. I don't know. I don't know. I like pretty much everybody.
Best friend at high school?
Best friend in high school? It'd probably be my friend Nate Humphrey. Okay. Good guy. We played comic poker. Yeah.
Your current height and weight?
Oh, please, no. I'm 5'10" and shrinking, and I've lost like 25 pounds in the last 6 months. You know,
that could answer 25 less than you were.
Yeah. And it's like because I'm not eating like I'm 16 years old anymore, which is really hard for me.
Simpsons or Family Guy?
See, the right answer is Simpsons, but I haven't seen enough of The Simpsons. I know. I'll say Family Guy.
Okay. Ben Affleck or Robert Pattinson as Batman?
Ben Affleck. I say Ben Affleck because if you've ever listened to any audio commentary of Ben Affleck's, you are absolutely charmed.
That's true. That's true. Is Clear and Present Danger one as amazing? You ever heard that? Oh, no, sorry.
I haven't listened to that one, actually.
The other Tom Clancy one I did, I can't remember. The worst Star Wars movie?
Oh, that's Last Jedi. That's the second one, the Rian Johnson one. I hated that a lot.
Is Last Jedi? No, it's The Rise of Skywalker's the third one. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I understand that this is a lightning rod and people will hate me for it. I did not like it. Sorry.
I actually didn't mind that. I walked out of the next one. I actually walked out. Because I walked out, you know.
I've never seen 3 movies that felt like people fighting each other. Like it was like, here's this movie, and then here's a second movie trying to undo the first movie, and then here's the third movie trying to correct the you know, like it felt intentional, you know.
Well, I found out they were making it up as they were going along, which blew my mind. I thought they'd some 3-movie blueprint, but they were literally making them up.
But wouldn't you kill to see, like, you've heard the stories of George Lucas talking about his version of what it would be. And I'm like, this sounds so insane. I now desperately need the George Lucas version.
I've never actually found this, right? But when I was 7 or 8, when Star Wars came out, I remember reading in a British Star Wars magazine an interview with George Lucas. And he said that he was talking to Mark Hamill about what Mark Hamill was going to be doing in 40 years' time because he wanted him to come back and play an old Luke Skywalker.
Yes.
And he had a plan for 9 movies.
Yes.
I've never seen this interview anywhere else since, you know. But like,
I saw it. I remember as a kid. Yeah, I remember like, oh, he wants to do a sequel, but he did mention this afterwards. He's like, yeah, I turned in a treatment of what I wanted it to be, and Disney was like, nah. You know,
the Star Wars we really want, though, is the original plan for the prequel trilogy. Have you ever heard the original plan?
No.
Oh, my God. This was Lucas had done the meetings with the guys and everything, right? I heard this from a good source. George Lucas was going to direct episode 1, right? Direct episode 1. Number 2 was going to be Frank Darabont. And number 3 was David Fincher when Anakin Skywalker goes dark. And it was going to be the same actor playing Anakin in all 3 movies, and it was DiCaprio.
Wow.
Can you imagine DiCaprio at that time playing Anakin Skywalker?
Oh, and my God.
He decided he was going to do them all and scrap the plan. But meetings were had and all this, you know. Amazing.
Wow. That's amazing.
And your last question. It's been a couple of years. Should Will Smith be forgiven for slapping Chris Rock?
Wait, say it again?
Should Will Smith be forgiven for slapping Chris Rock?
No. That was so egregious and insane. Yeah. That was the most insane thing ever. Until Chris Rock and him decide to do a movie together and everything's completely fine, you know, but at that point, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Bad Boys 5, that would be amazing.
Oh my gosh, it would be amazing. That is the most. But you know what's so weird about that is I had just read his autobiography like 3 days before that happened.
Yeah.
And if you read his autobiography and you see this thread of him feeling like he can't protect the women in his life.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And it was like, that happened. I was like, this totally makes sense. Like, I was like, this totally. But as somebody said, he goes, yeah, but if Jason Momoa had made that joke, I don't think Will Smith would have jumped out of his chair, you know? The Rock says that joke, you'd be like, yeah, that's funny, you know? Sorry, Jada, you know?
Well, on that note, I'm going to go and get changed. But listen, it's been great talking to you. Like,
Thank you.
We've never met in the flesh, but hopefully one of these days. Are you moving? Where are you moving from LA then? Where are you going to the East Coast now, or what's the plan?
No, I'm still in LA. I just live in LA. So, I mean, eventually, you know, when Otisburg shows up, you know, there's this part of me that's like, are we going to move? And then the weather's so perfect here all the time. I'm like, I don't know, maybe, but it's expensive. No, I live here in LA, but I do a lot of conventions, and I'm hoping to get over. I'd gone to London for a convention like a year and a half ago, and me and Randall Wallace were running around just telling stories, which was awesome. And but I've never made it over to your neck of the woods, but I want to. That'd be fun.
Well, LA all the time. We'll grab a pint next time.
Yes,
That'd be great.
Please.
Listen, all
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark.
Happy New Year.
Yes. Have a good tennis match.
I will do. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.